Hi everyone, Mark Idle here with your MassHShockey.com weekly recap. It's Friday, January 21st, and we've got a wild week of hockey to recap from last week's play. Many changes at the top of the divisions in both men's and women's. Before we get into the week's recap, let's take care of last week's weekly contest, our first contest, where we asked you to predict the outcome of the BC High Needham game over in the men's Division 1, and the winner was to win 2 Bruins tickets, compliments of CN Hockey. We received over 50 entries, but only one person actually predicted a 2-2 tie, which was Dan Gary of Plymouth, Massachusetts. So congratulations out to Dan Gary of Plymouth, Mass for getting that 2-2 tie correct, and Dan, enjoy the Bruins game on CN Hockey. Okay, so this week's contest is sponsored by Reebok Hockey. All you need to do is correctly predict the final score of the Hingham-Marshfield game being played on Monday the 24th at 6 p.m. All entries are timestamped, so make sure that you get your entries in prior to the start of that game in order to be eligible for this week's contest. This week's prize is going to be a Reebok 10K stick, which has a retail value of $199. A special thanks goes out to our friends over at Reebok Hockey. And don't forget to visit ReebokHockey.com for all your hockey equipment needs. Okay, here we go. As I said, a wild week across the state. So we'll mix it up a little bit and start with men's Division 3 this week, where we find Westwood and Hudson back at the top. We've got a new face now in the number 3 slot with the Pembroke Titans, a new arrival at 6-0-2. Our featured game last week had the Hudson Hawks up against number 3 Longmeadow. Hudson took care of business and won that game handedly, 6-2. So a pretty major setback for Longmeadow. A good leap forward for Hudson as they continue what looks to be a very solid season for them. This week we're going to feature in our Division 3 game of the week. We're looking at Drake coming in at 7-0-1. They will square off against Lowell, who's coming in at 7-2-1. That game's going to take place on Saturday, the 22nd at 11 a.m., so that should be a good tilt. In men's Division 3A, Holyoke climbs into the number 1 spot this week, while last week's number 1, Groton Dunsville, falls to number 2. Amherst Pelham is in number 3 with a 7-1-2 record. Our Division 3A game of the week last week lived up to the hype and the billing that we had with Fitchburg, number 8, knocking off their division rival Littleton 3-2. This week's Division 3A game of the week is going to be our number 4 and number 6 seeds squaring off. The 8-2-1 Agawam Brownies will face off against the 5-3-1 Belchertown Orioles on Saturday, the 22nd at 8 p.m. In men's Division 2, we have a major shakeup in the rankings with Newburyport Clippers moving into number 1. Wilmington comes in at number 2 at 7-1-1, while last week's number 1, Peabody, falls all the way down to number 3. Last week's game of the week, we had number 8, Bishop Fenwick, knocking off their league rival Marion 6-2. This week's Division 3 game of the week has 9-0 Mansfield facing off against 6-1-1 Canton on Saturday, the 22nd at 6 p.m. So Mansfield taking their 9-0 record against last year's defending champions, Canton. Men's Division 1, outside of Severian holding the 1 spot at 7-0-1. This keeps turning upside down each week. The rankings are going to continue to be volatile as we're starting to see a lot of parity now in Division 1. We need to look no further than this week's number 2. The Barnstable Red Raiders come in at number 2. They're working their way to try to claim the top spot. Last week's number 4, Weymouth, is now number 3 at 9-1-1. And we certainly had the right game highlighted last week. The contest between number 7 Hingham and number 6 Malden Catholic turned out to be a great one as Hingham held Malden Catholic off and went on to win 2-1, another classic between these two teams. You can watch that video of that game up on our website, right on the homepage. So if you didn't get to catch the game in person, click on the link. Great game to watch. Just a very strong performance by both teams. This week we're going to keep an eye on number 2 Barnstable heading to Bridgewater Raynham as our game of the week. That's going to take place on the 22nd at 5 p.m. So Barnstable, Bridgewater Raynham should be a good one. No changes over at the top of Division I. We find Woburn and St. Mary's still holding the top 2 spots, with Winthrop Lynn coming in at number 3 again. Lexington is now 7-0-2, a solid number 4. In last week's game of the week, we featured number 5 Acton Boxborough against number 7 Billerica. The Acton Boxborough Cardinals took care of business there, and this week's featured game, we have number 7 Hingham squaring off with Austin Prep. Hingham coming in at 9-2-0. That game's going to take place on Saturday, the 22nd at 7 p.m. game. Moving over to Women's Division II, we have a new team at the top here. Coming in at number 1 this week, we have the Duxbury Lady Dragons at 8-1-0, continuing their strong play this year. The Fontbonne Ducks dropped to number 2 for the first time this year, while Norwood moves up and claims the number 3 spot this week. Last week, we selected the battle between last year's Division I champion St. Mary's and last year's Division II champion, the Fontbonne Ducks. Great performance with St. Mary's winning 2-0 in a really strong contest by both teams, and showing off why they were last year's state champions at Division I and Division II. This week we're looking at a big game coming up between the 9-0 Medfield Warriors up against the 4th 3-1 Canton Bulldogs. This game's going to take place on Saturday the 22nd at 8 p.m. So catch the Medfield Warriors against the Canton Bulldogs Saturday night. Well, that's going to be it for this week's recap. Don't forget to enter this week's contest on the home page to win yourself a Reebok 10K stick. Check the site on Monday night for the new game of the week. We'd like the coaches to keep sending in your team stats. You can send those into info@masshighschoolhockey.com. And I'll be back with you guys next Friday with another MassHighschoolhockey.com weekly recap.